Hi there, and thanks very much for tuning in to the Explaining History videocast. The reason I'm creating this video today is it's a helpful guide for mums and dads who are a bit perplexed about what to do with history homework. The national curriculum changes every couple of years, particularly regarding history. It's changed a lot in recent years, and the kinds of skills that pupils have to exhibit are also appear to be constantly changing at a faster pace than many mums and dads who have got an awful lot to do and an awful lot to concentrate on, as we all do, are able to really process. So I thought I'd create this quick video to give you just a couple of distinctions and to guide you in in a couple of ways that you might find helpful. So the first really is that we're less focused on repeating knowledge than we are about developing judgment and understanding. In essence, the thing that history teachers want to see and examiners want to mark in pupils' essays and pupils' work is evidence of what we call critical thinking. So it's important to have a good depth of subject knowledge, firstly. And this comes from reading about the subject and using other media to find out about it. Perhaps if your kids are slightly younger, wading through very dense books on the subject is probably quite difficult. But the more that they can absorb, the more subject knowledge they can absorb, then the important bit, being able to make judgments and being able to come to conclusions based on evidence, that will be an awful lot easier. And that's really where most of the marks are. So, for example, if you can come to a conclusion as to why a historical event took place, what the most important factor in making it happen was, why change over time occurred in the way that it did, and what the impact of different factors such as economic factors, social factors, and that sort of thing are, you're going to get more marks. Now I'll talk about that in greater depth in a moment. But think about the difference between knowledge and judgment a bit like this. You might be able to memorise the London Underground. You might understand. You might be able to memorise all the tubes on the Circle line, for example. That's knowledge, but it's knowledge that is particularly flat. It's not particularly useful. Um, Unless, of course, you're going to understand why the Circle Line was built in the way that it was, why the tube stations were opened in the order that they were, and what purpose this had, what it tells us about the Circle Line, the history of the Circle Line, and its current usage, for example. And that's what we really care about in terms of subject knowledge. We're not interested in knowledge for its own sake. Now, that might seem awfully kind of backward and not the sort of thing that historians are meant to be doing. But think about how you communicate with other people all day, every day. If you think about the conversations you have about politics or what's on the television or football teams or what have you, everything that you're communicating to another person is a series of judgments based on evidence. I don't like that football player. I thought that plotline in that soap opera was awful. I really enjoy this music. I really enjoy that film. I think that the current government are insane. That kind of thing. When those are judgments, and they're normally, if someone says, "Well, why do you think the government's insane?" or "Why don't you like that soap opera?" you can then go, "Well, for these reasons," and present factual knowledge that supports the thing that you're trying to say. And this is the essence of most bits of historical writing. So, for example, if we are looking at why Hitler came to power, why did Hitler come to power in January 1933? You might say, well, there are several reasons, but of those several reasons, the fact that there had been an economic crisis in Germany for the previous 4 years is the most important. And the examiner or the teacher marking the work will then challenge the pupil to say, well, why do you think that is so important? Where is your evidence? And you say, well, evidence one, 6 million people were unemployed. Evidence two, the Nazi Party went from being a fringe party in 1929 to being the biggest party in Germany by November 1932. Evidence 3, there was the standards of living had slumped, crime had gone up, so on and so forth. So for every point you make in an essay, if you can support it with 1 or 2 pieces of evidence, you're going to have a very strong paragraph indeed, and that is going to very much endear the learner to the examiner. When there is a question, responding with a judgment is essential. And again, this is what we naturally do when we talk to other human beings. So if you have a question that says, to what extent were the generals in the First World War incompetent, you're going to be asked either, or the answer is either going to be to a greater or lesser extent. To say absolutely not, 100% not, well, that's an unsustainable thing to say. I mean, none of us can make that kind of judgment. We don't have a time machine, and even if we did, even if we'd gone back to 1916 and the Battle of the Somme, we still wouldn't be able to make that kind of judgment. It's just not possible. We can't say that they were absolutely competent either. And also, we can't quite sit in the middle and say, well, it's both and both. It's half and half. They were both competent and not competent. Because that doesn't make any sense. So the only thing that we can do, the only valid thing to say, is that they were to a greater extent incompetent or to a lesser extent incompetent. And then, when we start off with that line of argument, then the paragraphs throughout the essay or throughout the piece of work that we need to follow must prove that point by point. So you need to then divide up the evidence that shows that they were incompetent. You might find some evidence that challenges your theory, because none of us are ever going to be absolutely 100% watertight on anything. There will always be evidence in history that challenges some of the things that we have to say. However, you can always evaluate that and show where that evidence might have weaknesses. The examination of evidence, again, is another important thing that historians have to do. And in later videos, I'll talk about this in greater depth. But imagine that you hear a rumour, and perhaps not a very nice one, about a third party. It comes to you from a friend. Before repeating it, it's always good to know where these rumours originate, isn't it? So you might want to ask, well, where did this come from? Is it reliable? Can I say this without perhaps looking foolish? Or, you might find that the person who's telling you is unsure of where the rumour came from. You might find that they tell you it comes from a third party who is notoriously unreliable. You might find that it is actually a piece of a rumour that's been corroborated by 2 or 3 other people, in which case you're on much stronger ground. Not that I'm advocating spreading vicious rumours at all. And the same is true with evidence. Just because something has been said about the generals in the First World War, or been said about Hitler's rise to power, it doesn't mean to say that it is valid and reliable. We'll never know for sure exactly what has happened in the past because, as I've said, we don't have a time machine. We can't go back to the past and we can't simply know. So we've only got the relics of the past. We've only got the sources of the past, the documents, the information, the diaries, that sort of thing. It can really inform us. However, what we can do is look at those sources and see the extent to which they are reliable. If we have a large pile of evidence, much of which is reliable, that points towards the fact that Hitler came to power because of economic crisis, then we've got a strong, compelling picture. And we will never be able to say for certain that a thing is a thing or is not a thing. What we will be able to say is that there is a majority of evidence that suggests that one factor is important, or there is not a majority. There's a weak amount of evidence that suggests that that factor is important. And here's where we build our arguments from. Obviously, if there's a lot of good evidence that points towards a particular thing, then our arguments are going to reflect that. That's what we're going to start saying. If there isn't, then there isn't. And this is why we history teachers want you to be able to fully evaluate evidence. Upon strong evidence is built strong arguments. And upon strong arguments are built good essays. ultimately, when your son or daughter leaves Key Stage 3 history or GCSE history, or even A-level or degree level history, the real outcome is you want them to have been able to be a more critical thinker about the world. Often at parents' evening, parents come to me and they'll say, what job would my child have with history? And the answer is, well, I don't know. I mean, Prime Minister, street sweeper. I mean, it could go either way. It's really the wrong question. If you get a good degree in history or geography or RE or quantum physics or anything, you're going to have better opportunities in life than if you don't, right? It's the understanding history isn't about working towards a particular job or vocation. It's about understanding a principle of critical thinking. What do you need that for? Well, every career in the media, in law, in government, in business, anything that's even remotely important needs somebody there who can look at the evidence and go, yeah, but that just doesn't make sense. Why would that happen? I think we're going to make a big mistake if we go down that route. Or this evidence here suggests that that approach is more likely to bear fruit than others. So it is a subject that skills learners in thinking. And because there's so little of that in the world at the moment anyway, I'd encourage everyone to have a go. But there you go, I'm a history teacher, that's me. So, the basic principles of what I'm trying to say here are that if you orient all homeworks towards developing arguments, understanding sources, and critical thinking, you're going to have a lot more success than if you are simply looking at a wooden ruler trying to remember the kings and queens of England, as history lessons in days of yore were all about. But I'm going to produce some more of these videos as we go, just to give mums and dads out there a little bit of extra help if they are, pestered with mum, I can't do my homework, etc., etc., that sort of thing. Anyway, remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'm going to put a little video infographic type affair that's going to follow this video in a moment. Subscribe and you'll get weekly updates, not just on the how-tos, but also on subject knowledge as well. So if you are helping with history, this YouTube channel is going to help you. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.